Welcome to the channel. Today is my full review of Alien Rogue Incursion, available on PSVR2 and PCVR on December the 19th, with the MetaQuest version coming at some point in February 2025. This game is developed by Survios, who have been making VR games well before I entered the VR space back in 2016. So what is Alien Rogue Incursion? It's primarily an all-action first-person shooter with some light puzzle elements. You take control of Zulu Hendrix, who's a well-known character to Alien fans from Alien Defiance, Rescue and Resistance. You crash land on a planet called Perdan, which has a Gemini Exoplanet Solutions black site facility on it, and your job, along with your AI companion called Davis, is to fight your way into the heart of a new infestation of xenomorphs and seek out the truth of a new company conspiracy. There is some really good plot twists along the way that keep the story moving, but I'll avoid spoiling them for you. And there's one moment every fan of Aliens will never forget, and it could be the best "oh my god, I want to rip the headset off" moment I've had in a long time. And before we get too far into the review, this is known as Alien Rogue Incursion Part 1. Bombao! Part 1? What does that mean? This was unknown to me, and I instantly got worried when I first saw the initial loading screen that this was going to be a short experience. But fear not, it simply means the story is going to be continued, and I'll share my complete gameplay length in a moment. The game is set in a very familiar setting to pretty much all other Alien games. Dark corridors set in a 80s-like sci-fi industrial setting, with pipes and grates everywhere, creating a pretty intense atmosphere. The game does encourage exploration, but there's no open areas, and everything is contained to this one site, and it has around 4 to 5 floors for you to explore, which you'll access via lifts or ducts, which you can either walk through crouched, and some are really small and you have to use your hands to pull yourself through them. As you'll explore, you'll find small floppy like discs that contain voice notes, but these also double down as special door unlocks. Throughout the game you'll have a large PDA which expands from 1 to 3 screens, which is very cool, showing your map, inventory info and an information tab, and this is where you'll see how many of these floppy disks you've collected and if you completed a series of them, and if you do, it will give you access to certain locked doors on the map. To be clear, I never found all of these in my time to make this review, and I felt I was pretty thorough. My thoroughness was helped by the fact I got lost many times in the 10 hours I spent on Perdan, mostly down to a bug which constantly highlighted a previously completed task, making the map pretty difficult to use and to find out where to go next. But I managed mostly down to remembering and recognising certain sections of the game, and in the end, the bug didn't actually feel like a bad thing. I discovered quite a few new areas, trying to figure out where to go next and what to do, versus simply doing the next task. While playing Alien Rogue Incursion, the threat of aliens never lets up, and this is both a good and bad thing, and I'll get into that in a minute. If there's one thing Survios definitely nailed with Alien Rogue Incursion, it's capturing the feeling and atmosphere of playing an Aliens game really well in VR. Everything has that square, clunky look from the 80s. Computers make all the old noises you would expect, similar to, say, a Spectrum or an Amiga. And the place is littered with flashing buttons and lights that do absolutely nothing but look cool. There's thick smoke from pipes, snow when you're outside or inside a room with the window smashed, and some brilliant lighting effects. And some of these look straight out of a Michael Bay movie, leaving me overall impressed with the visuals. The aliens, which are clearly the stars of the show, look fantastic and come at you from everywhere and anywhere, and the only safe place you'll find is the panic rooms, which also serve as save points. Throughout the game, most rooms have gaps above the doors, or the aliens can just bust in through grates or via the many different air ducts above your head. They are very well animated most of the time, and only struggle with how to approach you when there's lots of objects in the way. They scream at you, claw at you, and do some very impressive jump attacks which take a considerable amount of health, even on the normal difficulty, and overall, the game wasn't easy. You only have 3 bars of health, and one jump attack can take 2 bars, meaning only one more hit, and it's game over. I think 8 to 12 hours of normal difficulty is a fair figure for most people's first playthrough time to get to the end credits. I did also try the insane mode to see how it affects gameplay, and from what I can tell, you basically take more damage and the number of aliens per wave is increased. While on the topic of aliens, we need to quickly discuss the topic of Alien Isolation, because I know many of you are hoping this is somehow that game in VR, and even though the aliens are challenging, they are nowhere near as threatening, even in huge packs, as the one alien you face when playing Alien Isolation. And I would say that these two games share very little in common aside from the visual settings. Alien Isolation was all about careful movement because you are the prey and you have no chance against that one xenomorph who is constantly hunting you, and it can be truly terrifying terrifying, especially when playing with the Mother VR mod. In Rogue Incursion, it's more like an Alien arcade shoot 'em up, but there is some jump scares, but the only thing you have to worry about really is if you have enough ammo for the next encounter and getting from A to B. And even though I felt Survios hinted that Rogue Incursion will have some sort of stealth elements, I would argue in my testing overall that simply isn't true. It doesn't matter how slow or quiet you are, they will come at you in packs of 2 or 3 and almost on a timer. Now you do have the scanner, which is beautifully retro looking, but after a while you simply won't use it or even need to. The scanner lets out a bleep, even when it's not in hand, to let you know another wave of aliens is coming, and due to the clunkiness of items, which I'm going to go into more detail to in a minute, it's more of a hindrance to use over being helpful. And lastly, you cannot hide in lockers or anywhere apart from inside the panic rooms, but you can slow the aliens down by shutting doors or keeping on the move by weaving in and out of computer consoles. But once a wave is triggered, you will eventually have to deal with them regardless. Now there are key moments of the story where the game will simply throw more aliens at you, but the very cool proximity grenades that stick to any surface, including your own body if you're not careful, kills them pretty quickly. The shotgun feels meaty, and it only takes 2 or 3 hits depending on proximity to take an alien down. The pistol takes around 3 to 4 shots, and the badass assault rifle is about 30 rounds if you can keep your shots on target. Now aside from the shooting, the gameplay in Alien Rogue Incursion mostly involves going from point to point accessing terminals, and a few of these terminals are covered in blood, which you have to clean off with your hand, which is a fantastic VR moment. At these terminals you'll also be rerouting power via computers to open different doors or activate different systems, using a high powered cutter to cut your way through welded doors to access previously inaccessible areas, and containers to collect resources like ammo, health stims and grenades. And overall, it's been good but a stressful game to play, and unfortunately it isn't always brilliant, but here's where I get into some negatives before giving you my summary. When I mentioned earlier that everything in this game is solid, I really wasn't joking. There were so many times items or just random panels on the floor get kicked around by your body, or there's a ton of boxes that just don't react well to physical interactions, causing them to fly all over the place when you try to pick them up. And this even comes down to simply grabbing ammo from your waist, which while I'm talking about it, all your slots can be adjusted in the options, and I highly recommend you go into the settings to do this as soon as you start the game. Everything you find in the game is collected by placing them into your chest, which never really makes sense and is never really explained, and it simply doesn't feel normal. Also, when you use anything that's permanent to the story like your PDA, the plasma cutter or your key cards, it's a 50-50 if it will go actually back into your hands, or you can simply just throw it away and reselect it again later. And this is the same for the weapons. So overall, the physical interactions do feel clunky and can cause you some problems, which is annoying, but also I personally love solid objects in VR. There's something really special about being able to physically touch and hold and feel weight of items in VR games. But there's something even more odd about Alien Rogue Incursion, and I can't quite put my finger on it, and you'll find this when you play it. You have a full body, as I mentioned earlier, which is great, but at times it feels like you're fighting yourself when you're trying to use some items. For example, you can grab a health stim, use it by stabbing yourself in the chest, but it will either stick to your hand, preventing you from grabbing your weapons, or it will stay stuck in your body. And overall, I can't believe I'm going to say this in a review, but this actually feels like a VR mod. That's the only way I can explain how it feels to play, and I would guess this was either originally meant to be a flat game, or there could well be a flat version of this game coming at a later date. For example, in this game you have weapon sway, albeit it is very light to experience, but having weapon sway in a VR game is just a bit unusual. Moving on, the voice work is excellent, the sound effects are also excellent, especially when it comes to the weapons, and there's only been a few bugs in my playtime. Your android companion, although very good at killing aliens, can be very glitchy. Some audio effects were also garbled. Aliens vanish and sometimes fall through the floor when you kill them, and as I mentioned earlier, my map had some issues with objective markers. A lot of this may be fixed in an upcoming patch, but I've had no communication if this is actually happening. In terms of PSVR PSVR2, the visual presentation I think is excellent, but it also uses reprojection from 60Hz to 120Hz. There is some odd ghosting effects when using some items at various points throughout the game, but even though there is reprojection, the text was fully readable throughout the game. Haptics are also put to excellent use, and especially the headset haptics.
Oh my god, you can hit yourself in the head and you can feel it.
And all the cutscenes also had really good haptics. I also played the PCVR version using a MetaQuest 3, and this game is exactly the same, even down to the weird ghosting that I mentioned earlier, which I thought was part of reprojection, is also in the PC version. If there was any differences of nitpicking between the two, I would simply say the PSVR2 version seems to load a bit quicker. Now, to summarise my thoughts with Alien Rogue Incursion, I believe this is a must-have for fans of the franchise. It's got some backtracking that feels like filler, but I was still having a great time even in these moments. But it definitely feels more of a shoot 'em up over everything else. It's a bit clunky, it can be a bit frustrating, and there is a few bugs that I've mentioned, but I've really enjoyed my time with it once I got over my frustrations, and hopefully the game will improve with some updates. I'm really glad I've played it, and I'm also glad Survios have brought this franchise officially to VR, even if it's still a little bit rough around the edges. Overall, it gets a buy recommendation from me. There's some epic moments to be had, and it's a great game on both systems, and I'm very much looking forward to checking out the MetaQuest 3 version coming in February 2025. Thank you ever so much for watching. If this video helps you make a decision, please leave a like and be sure to subscribe for more VR content.